This evening's event. This is the Seed to STEM event sponsored by the Northeastern University Office of Alumni Relations. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jackie Isaacs. I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the College of Engineering, where I'm a professor of mechanical and industrial engineering, and I've been at Northeastern for quite some time, since 1995. I'm so happy to be here tonight and see the room filled with young, wonderful faces. We hope you enjoyed the reception outside and had a chance to talk with various colleagues and friends, and moreover, to meet new people and make new connections through a network. Networking is a really important, and using this event to do that is a big opportunity to, as I said, make new friends and build connections for new colleagues. Northeastern has about 2,500, just under 2,500 alumni across the states and in 164 countries around the world. And the Alumni Association is keeping us you in the room. So we, as you can see, have a great event lined up with 3 accomplished alumni. And to start us off with some of the opening remarks, I'd like to introduce Dean Carla Broadley. As Dean of the College of Computer Science, I know, it's like spit it out, CCIS, Computer and Information Science, she's leading a significant effort to establish a computing population of students, faculty, researchers, and staff that reflects today's global society. This is an initiative that speaks across all of the colleges that are represented here tonight, and I think it brings all of us together. So, Dean Broadley.
Exactly what you just did, because it's really difficult to say the College of Computer and Information Science. It just doesn't roll off the tongue.
You did it.
So well done. I feel so much more comfortable. I'm so happy to be here, to see all of these women. You're going to hear from the panelists. You've read their bios, so they're going to introduce themselves, I think, at the beginning of the panel. That's not my role. I wanted to just say a few remarks about why I'm so excited to see this room filled with women who are in STEM and also our panelists. So I came to STEM in a very odd way. I started out as an English major at McGill University in 1981. My parents kind of rolled their eyes about why I chose that, because I had never been that good at English, but I had decided I wanted a job where I was going to be the person who decided what the book of the month was for the Book of the Month Club. So I was going to just get to read really good books that someone else had already decided were good enough to be part of the Book of the Month Club. So that was my plan. So I got to university and I took English, and you know, because I was straight out of high school, I thought, oh, I should probably take some math too, because you know, you should just always have some math. So I took calculus and I took Cal 2, and then it was my sophomore year, and I thought, well, you know, I love to read books, but I'm not doing that well. I'm getting a B-, C+ average in my English classes, and well, economics went really well. I got an A in economics, and that seems really practical. So I'm going to switch and be an economics major. And then I took another math class, because that was fun. And I took a couple economics classes, and they were pretty fun, and I did well in them. And then one day my roommate came home. She was a metallurgical engineering student, and she threw down a pack of cards on the dining room table and said, ugh, you'd like computer science. And I don't think she was complimenting me. And so I thought, what's that? Because this is 1982, and who knew what a computer science class was? And I took computer science, and I wrote my first program, not with cards, thank goodness, they switched to not cards the year I took it, or I don't think I would have survived. And for those of you who have taken a lot of math and engineering, I programmed Newton's method, and that was it. I was like, I love this. So I switched to computer science. Just as a funny anecdote, years later, I met the woman who had the job I thought I wanted. That woman who decides what the book of the month is for the Book of the Month Club. And she told me that it ruined reading for her because she had to read so quickly, she never got to enjoy a book again. And now she never read in her spare time, she just watched TV and went to bars. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm really glad I still love to read. I finished a book last week. I don't think it was in the Book of the Month Club. It was a little trashier. But I managed to still keep a love of reading while then having a love of computer science. And then I went on to get a PhD, and I did some things, and now here I am as the dean. So the story of my route to computer science has really, really influenced the way I've thought about computer science for this university. So for those of you that are undergraduates, we have 27 combined majors with other fields, including engineering, science, and liberal arts, and arts, media, and design. We have a program called Meaningful Minors in Computer Science, which is, I don't think everyone should be a computer science, but at this point in life, I think everyone should know a little bit. And so it's a program that looks at how do we customize your learning in computer science for your major. So the classes that someone who's an English major would take are very different than someone who is a biology major. The English major might take natural language understanding in addition to learning to code. The biology major might take computational biology. The last program that we created to try to think about really how do we bring people into computer science even after they've graduated, it's called the Aligned Masters in Computer Science. This is a master's in computer science for people who didn't study computer science as undergraduates. And they come in, everybody from under the sun. We've had a theater major, we have engineering, people who majored in engineering, people who majored in biology, chemistry, whatever. Come in, do 2 semesters of basically a bridge. Then you start the master's classes, then you go out on co-op, then you graduate, and you make 6 figures. And what's really interesting about this from the employers is the diversity of thought that this brings toward tech. Because what do you get if you have someone who has a biology or a chemistry or a mechanical engineering undergraduate degree, and then they have computer science as well? So it's so exciting to see all of you. Did anyone else take a route through English before they got here? Oh, that's so funny. No wonder I like you. So, did anyone, how many people had more than one major? How many people are just starting out and have only one major so far? I know I met a few freshmen. Experiment. You never know. Maybe you want to be the person that decides the Book of the Month Club, even though you're at a STEM event. On that note, I will conclude and let the panel moderator take over and do the introduction. So, really wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for those remarks. I was a metallurgist, actually. I was, yes. Not quite the same now. I do engineering and public policy, but that's not about me. It's about our panelists. So I would love to hear more, have everybody introduce themselves. What we agreed that our panelists are going to do name, rank, and serial number. They're going to talk about their name, their title, the year of graduation, and then a short remark about either a favorite co-op or some cool memory they had when they were at Northeastern. So, Azita, why don't you start?
Hello, thank you for invitation and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Azita Resch, and presently I work at theyre Pharmaceutical. I'm head of safety and pharmacovigilance in that company. Previously, I worked with Ariad Pharmaceutical within pharmacovigilance department, head of aggregate reporting. And previous to that, going back to Genzyme, which I worked long years over there. I'm coming from old school, a pharmacy degree with Bachelor of Science in '88. and PharmD graduating 91. One of my fondest memory is a PharmD program that Northeastern offered at that time. You had to take second year of medical school in Tufts University without attending to first year. So it was always a struggle for all of us there. And we were glad to passing the course. And one of the courses was neurology. And I failed the exam. I had to retake the exam. And I was very frustrated. I didn't want to leave the program, but I was determined. So make the long story short, I studied very hard, and I passed with an A grade in that course. That brought me to repeat an internship in New England Medical Center, brought me to authoring 2 book chapters for pharmacy, a review book for passing the exam for licensing. So it was something that started negative and helped me to learn about the field that I was not so good on, and I really enjoy the field of neurology, and I helped with submission of one of the product for MS indication in my career.
Thanks, Azita.
Great. My name is Christina Cash. Thank you. I'll echo the sentiments of having me here today. I'm very excited to be here. I work as a process improvement consultant for Liberty Mutual Insurance. Their headquarters is actually 3 T-stops down from where we are right now. I have a Master's of Engineering Management from Northeastern. I graduated from that last year, and prior to that, I was an industrial engineer, class of 2009, so I was a double Husky upon graduating last year. And my favorite academic story from my time at Northeastern was my sophomore year. I, long before coming to college, knew that I wanted to do engineering, something with math and science. What I didn't know was what kind. And through talking to professors and programs that were offered freshman year, I discovered industrial engineering, and I just loved everything that I learned about it. So when it came for day 1, class number 1 of Introduction to Industrial Engineering 101 for beginners, I was in Snell Library, where there's no windows, down in that basement. If you haven't had a class there yet, you don't know what time of day it is. It's like a casino. The assignment that we had was to break up into teams, and we had a cookie assembly line. And you had a chocolate chip cookie from a bag that you frosted, sprinkled, and then gift wrapped. And we had certain perimeters that we had to make. We had quality goals, we had timeliness goals, we had orders that we had to make for the customer. And 45 minutes later, covered in frosting, but laughing and having had a great time, I learned what the essence of industrial engineering was in that one class. And what it was taking a process that you think of, oh, we just have to make this little cookie gift bag. How many complex operations went into making that if you went too fast, then your quality suffered. If you worried about quality too much, your timeliness suffered. You had to work as a team, you had to collaborate, and it captured everything that industrial engineering was, and that was the class that I knew I had made the right career choice. And that hands-on approach to learning that Northeastern has led me to remember that story and its impact all these years later. And I am still thrilled with the decisions I made for Northeastern and for industrial engineering.
Thanks so much. Allison.
I'm Allison Ventura. I graduated with a degree in computer science in 2015, and now I'm working at HubSpot over in Cambridge, where I'm a senior software engineer working on our front-end infrastructure team, focusing on internationalization. I'm leading our efforts there on our internationalization infrastructure. For fondest Northeastern memory, I remember my favorite class has always been the Fundamentals of Computer Science class, the first one you take, and it introduced me to functional programming, and programming in general was the first time I ever did any programming, and I loved that class, and I got through it. I didn't think I was exceptional at it, but then the professors asked me to tutor it after that, and I was honored. I accepted it. They really needed tutors, clearly. But I really felt like through tutoring, I learned the fundamentals even more than I had just having finished the class. Tutoring was like an awesome experience for me. And I've continued to mentor in my career, and I feel like I learned a lot at Northeastern through tutoring and helping students learn programming. A lot of them were in a similar place where I was.
Thank you, Allison. That's a lot of rich memories of time at Northeastern and a lot of experience. So we have a couple of questions that we're going to ask tonight to our panelists. And the first one is looking around the room this evening. I'm really happy to see so many young faces in the audience. And there's a lot of great opportunities for career growth in the new STEM fields. So the question is, based on some of the things we've heard in the news, last week, for example, the news at Northeastern had a story on the use of robots in disaster relief. Or we've been hearing a lot about autonomous vehicles, or AI, or the use of sensors and the Internet of Things. So we might hear stories like, well, is our refrigerator going to know when the milk's out and order it, and somebody's going to come back in and get it there before we come home from work? Or when can we use robotics or robots to help aid in our aging population? So there's lots of really exciting things that are happening. With you guys in your industries, the question to you is, what are some of the emerging trends in your respective fields that you think might provide some exciting career opportunities and could change the economy or our lives or benefit society at large? So I think, Allison, you were going to go first, right?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited about anything to do with automation. I think a lot of the software we're building around automation makes humans even better at their job. I used to work on our marketing automation tool at HubSpot, and I would see these marketers use this tool that really just made them extremely more effective at their job. And I'm really excited about that. And not just about making people better at their job, but automation can help so many people with disabilities that can't do everything that an average person probably can. And that's going to change lives so much. And I'm genuinely excited about those opportunities that we have in computer science, building software to do this. I work at a marketing and sales company, so I'm focusing on how I can make marketers and salespeople extremely effective at their job. But I'm seeing it everywhere with automation, whether it's self-driving cars people who can't walk, that'll take them to new places. And I'm genuinely very excited about that.
Thanks, Allison. Christina.
So I'll say for Liberty Mutual, I don't directly work with any type of emerging technology, but I can tell you that any rumors you're hearing of using drones to go into disaster zones or like robots that Jackie mentioned, it is keeping some of our agents safer than having to go out into some of these hard-hit areas and get up on ladders or go into somewhere that might not be safe. So I don't know the full extent of the drone use, but that is one thing that they're doing to try to keep people safe when they're looking at damage from storms, is sending drones with cameras in. And the one piece of emerging technology that I do see in work is automation, similar, but it's process automation. So how can we pull out some low complexity tasks, some redundant tasks that our employees are doing day after day after day, to make them automated by a bot or some type of programmable software that can auto-send these things or auto-do them for them. And we do kind of deal with a lot of people saying, well, if you're going to start programming these bots to do these emails or to proofread these documents, what's that going to mean for my job? Isn't a bot just going to come and be programmed to do what I do? And so what I deal a lot with in process improvement and in my degree, in my world, is to let people know that that's not what our intent is of bringing in this automated technology to help improve processes. If we can reduce those redundant tasks that you're doing, which you might think, oh, I only have to do it 10 times a day, that's not that much. But if you add up the time 10 times a day, a week, a month, a year, we can be freeing up your capacity to do so many more impactful things. You can get your hands onto more interesting projects. You can have time to work with a mentor. It can just, even if we don't refill your time with some other job task, maybe we're just freeing up your mental capacity a little bit and your energy a little bit so that you can be happier at work. So taking in mind that process automation and reducing some of those redundant tasks isn't trying to pull people away from their jobs or to have robots replace them, but it's to fill your time with better to make better use of your time and to use more of your mental capacity and more of your skills for more difficult work than that mundane processes that you might be doing.
Azita.
I need to give a little bit background about my job. It's not usually a pharmacist doesn't go directly to pharmacovigilance. That's a mouthful. Safety. So I overlook safety of the drugs during clinical trials from phase 1 to phase 3, even post-marketing. And we use physicians as our investigator to collect information. This information previously was collected on paper, then gets in-house, entered into the computer. And right now, having physicians to have iPads as they are getting this information, collecting during their physical exam, to collect it, and we will get to have access to real data at real time. Also, having multiple sites internationally, physicians, investigators, collecting that information and having copy of their imaging, MRIs, all be connected and transfer it to different people to help us to assess safety of the product has been very helpful. With that comes patient privacy, as we have seen in media, how we could use these procedures, how we could use these tools with being mindful of regulations and patient safety. So with technology, I think we need to be mindful how to adjust ourselves to use that technology in most efficient way.
Okay, thanks. The next question addresses workplace culture and the emerging workforce, of which many of you are part. So do you have any ideas on how the future workplace could be shaped with new initiatives that are influenced by the incoming workforce, particularly if there are more women in the STEM fields entering the workplace? And for example, commuting policies or working remotely. You could also discuss other practices to help balance professional and personal lives. So go ahead,
I'll take that one away. So I've worked in manufacturing. I worked at Raytheon before going to Liberty Mutual, and now I'm at Liberty Mutual. So I've worked in manufacturing and I've worked in service, and they have very, very different cultures in terms of dress and attitudes and presentation. But a few things that I've noticed and I think that are consistent across the industry, regardless of where you're working, is one is workplaces are getting more casual. You'll see a lot more business casual than business formal. And I just want to say a friendly reminder that that does not mean workplaces are getting sloppier. So please do remember to iron your shirts and to be hygienic. And just because it's, you laugh, but I promise you it happens. Because just, even though the workplace culture is getting more casual, and you do want to fit in, if everybody else is in jeans and a blouse and you're coming in with like a 3-piece suit, you do have to kind of balance that you're going in with the right attitude. But keep in mind that you're not just showing respect for yourself if you're dressed well and you're dressed clean and you're ironed. You're also showing respect for your coworkers, your peers, and the people that you're meeting. So that would be one thing that as the workplace culture gets more and more relaxed and more casual, don't forget your confidence, your presence, and dressing professionally, whatever that might be for your office. The second trend that I'm seeing is companies are spending a lot more time and effort getting the voices of their employees, learning about the employee experience. How is our employee base feeling every day at work? And they're even starting to extend that to the whole value chain of their employee experience. So we're talking from recruiting you on LinkedIn through to bringing you into the job interview, your first 90 days, how you're doing in your job and your development so that you'll stay at the company. So depending on the company, they might have problems with attraction. So insurance is not sexy. We have a lot of trouble bringing in some of top talent into Liberty Mutual because people don't think that there's that much to do in insurance, and I can promise you it is a much more vast field. And I was one of those people that didn't really get why you needed so many thousands of people working in insurance for one company when I started. But you can have a hard time bringing that talent in. So they're putting a lot of effort into attracting top talent. And the other thing that companies are doing, there are some companies that bring in a lot of top talent, but they're not keeping them. So they're not retaining the talent that they're bringing in. So we're in a great place right now that employees are spending a lot of time and effort trying to understand what's life like for our employees and how they're experiencing their day-to-day work here. And that's also on us to speak up and let them know how we're feeling so they get the right impression of how we're doing, but also not coming across as the company owes me something or the company should do this for me. Remember, you have to put in the effort for the company to want to give you those efforts and those perks. And then the other thing, going to the question on how to maintain a work-life balance, the advice I would put forth on that is try to make sure your hours are quality hours. I've been in environments where you got a lot of kudos if you were working 12-hour days, but that was kudos from the leadership that just saw you being there for 12-hour days. When you would really be out there on the floor, out there in the work, those weren't 12 quality hours. There could be goofing off in those hours. There could be sloppy work that you had to redo because you were so tired in hour 11 the day before that you had to redo it. So really focus more on being organized and disciplined to make your hours quality hours, because it's going to make your work life that much more effective. And then it'll help your outside of work life be that much more effective because you're not having to spend those extra hours. But there does take some norm setting and discussing with your team to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you're not leaving at 5 o'clock and everybody else is there till 8. So you do want to actually approach that with a little bit of caution so you don't burn any bridges.
Thank you. Azita.
Yes. So going to my field, clinical development, we do work with colleagues worldwide, Europe, Asia, India. And sometimes to be able to meet and have a meeting that all continent we could meet, it's odd hours that you either 8 o'clock for Japan is 8 o'clock at night, Australia similar, Europe ahead of us. So you have to be flexible to combine your work time and home time. And we are mostly project oriented, so the flexibility is given in our workplace to be able to work from home or make our hours. So that gives flexibility to be a mom, to be in that school function that you have to attend, but at the same time brings work home. And it puts ownership on the employee to say, this is my time. And when you are compensating for different time to work with your colleagues, so you will feel comfortable to take that 1 or 2 hours that you have to go to school to attend your child program.
Thank you. Allison.
There's a lot of great new workplace flexibility that's opening up in the workplace, and especially being a software engineer, like that's always the stereotypical, oh, you work with a computer, of course you can work from anywhere in the world. And while that might be true, I do also interact with other people, and I work with a team, and we are like to talk to each other. But I do work with people across the globe, especially now in my new role, working on internationalization. And so now I'm starting to realize, like, how can I be flexible personally to work with people across the globe, and also work with my team here in Boston. And I'm very lucky at my current company that I have the flexibility to work on times that work for me. And I'm not a mother, but a lot of this new flexibility that's coming up in the workplace isn't just something that is good for mothers, isn't just something that's good for women even. Men enjoy these benefits as well, and I think it's making us all happier in the workplace and probably more productive. We all have off days, I have bad days, and without a doubt, my bad days are my least productive days. So the work that we're all doing to try to push for better workplace environments is so important for everyone. And it's so great that we can have maternal leave, paternal leave, anything for to make people more flexible, be there for their families, not to have both parents working, whatever your situation may be. These opportunities opening up are very exciting. And yes, software engineers work with a computer and can be remote, but I see these opportunities for remote work opening across our other departments, whether it be sales or support. There's a lot of opportunities to work in other states or countries, and this is an exciting time, and I hope we can go even further. I haven't been in the industry very long, but luckily I have mentors. I have people that I can talk to, like, what was it like when you were my age and you were in the workplace? Where have we come from? Where do you think we're going? I think like the younger generation and the older generation, of course, we both have a lot to teach each other, and hopefully we can make things better together.
Thanks. Great answers. The third question for our panelists. Okay, with product development and emerging technology moving at a rapid pace, industries are working harder and faster to develop new product lines and capitalize on emerging technologies. So the competition to bring a new product to market is often challenged by testing, regulation, safety issues before it can be available to customers. So in your different industries, how do you balance safety or regulation within product development all the way through to commercialization in each of your roles? And some, it may be easier to answer this question than others. We're going to start with Azita.
Yes, I work on the safety of the product in the clinical development. Cost of drug development is very high, the time spent, and more with testing and quality of medical care. It's better to have more time to collect more information, either for efficacy of the product or safety. But more time and more investigator or sites to be added to a study, 20 sites worldwide, it's much more costly than a local or few sites. So we are getting to market, and we are trying to decrease the time of drug development. With that being said, we have less time to collect information. Sometimes we use surrogate endpoints to reach to that goal of finding efficacy or safety. Biomarkers for that reason. And with regulations, FDA understand the need for the patients. Unmet need, it's one of the fields that you could move on to decrease the time for approval of the product. But with that comes post-marketing commitment. With that comes that we have to do more studies when product gets, or conditional approval, which regulatory agencies will give approval but ask you to do further studies. With that, there are other regulations come into place that regulatory agency require from us. So it is a balance, and there is a reason for regulations to be there, and it's we have to be mindful of that and understand that we need to use different avenues to learn more about our product.
Thank you. Allison.
So I don't work in healthcare, and of course, like in healthcare, you need to test everything. Healthcare software can be very difficult to test for, and you have to automate everything to make sure that things are tested. But I do still have users for the software that I build, whether it be before I was working on our marketing automation tool. I have users who interact with that tool, and now I'm working on internationalization infrastructure, and I want to make sure everything is translated and the content is good, and then things work the way that users may use the web differently all across the globe. and I want to delight them. I want them to be happy. So I also have to test everything, make automated tests to make sure that these mistakes, human errors, are picked up. And it's saved me a lot of times. So that's just sort of insight into like software engineering testing. There's a lot of other perspectives, and whether it be healthcare software or financial software, things like that. But regardless of what software you're building, testing and making sure that your users are not frustrated is very important. All I can say.
Thanks.
So I haven't had a position that's directly related to the specifics in this question, but I have had a number of assignments and projects that have multiple stakeholders. So in terms of a safety versus regulation versus getting it out to the customer, I haven't had that specific, but I have had projects that have multiple stakeholders that are involved, that have different timelines, that have different expectations, that have different goals that you're trying to balance. And advice that I can pull from that to share with you are twofold. And the first one being, set a solid foundation before you even get started with regardless of what it is. Get as much information that you can, get as many facts as you can, get as much data, talk to as many people. If you have multiple stakeholders, can you expectations set with all of them of what are they expecting? What are they expecting from you? What are they expecting from the project? So that when you go in, you can have a more narrowly focused scope of what you're trying to get to, rather than all these different ideas that you're trying to herd into one concept. The second approach is, I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of it, but it's a great life approach to take, is PDCA. It stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. And it's an iterative approach to projects and problem solving and getting work done. So the first step is to plan. It's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to tackle this? So that's kind of getting your ducks in a row, setting your solid foundation, talking to your stakeholders. Second is D, so do. So actually going out and doing whatever it is, taking action on whatever your plan was. But maybe not a huge action. I'm not talking you're doing the whole project under do. You're just doing a section of it. You're just doing a slice. Check, how did it go? Did it work? Was it successful? Can we capture anything from this? Do we have any new information from this iteration? And then the last one is adjust. So how did it go? What can we cycle back to for our next plan that we can learn from this? And in taking this approach, you can have both the good, which is maybe some quick wins that you can bring back to stakeholders, customers, higher ups in your business of what went well, but you can also catch issues before they bloom into something huge. So you're testing it as you go, so that you're not just passing down some huge defect onto your customer, or down the line you've possibly caught it when you haven't put as much time, haven't put as much energy and effort into it. So that's another approach to take, that you can have some small wins and also catch some issues that you can report out to multiple people of how your progress is going, rather than just taking on some huge month-long project and not having any type of updates the whole time through.
Thanks. These are great answers. And I'm hoping that you guys are thinking up of questions, because we're going to have a Q&A after we finish a couple more of our questions of our panelists. So something about current events. Over the past few weeks, multiple media outlets have been reporting on gender discrimination in the workplace. Most recently, Forbes.com published an article that Google was being sued for gender discrimination by 3 female former employees. So given this national conversation that we've been hearing or participating in around gender, microaggression, equity in the workplace, maybe you guys could discuss some of your personal experiences that you might have faced within male-dominated industries, and moreover, offer some suggestions or strategies to address some of the situations you might have faced. So this is Allison, you're starting, right?
Sure. So luckily, I don't have a nightmare story to tell everyone, and I hope none of you ever do. I do. Of course, it's very important to hear the women and their stories who have experienced adversity and their problems, and how can we address these problems. And I think, as much as I don't want any of you to have a nightmare story, there probably will be situations where there's these small things like microaggressions, where people are doubting that you actually are a software engineer, or second-guessing or quizzing you on what you know. And it'll be frustrating. It'll be exhausting. I don't know if or when it will stop. I pray that it does. And sometimes if people will be quizzing you, or they'll doubt your profession, and sometimes you'll feel really good because you'll nail all those questions and it'll go great. And then sometimes you can't answer everything and you put yourself down. And it stinks, but that's because you were put in an impossible situation. Not everyone can answer all of those things. And don't put yourself down if you ever get into that position. I guess that's all I can say. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear you having no nightmare stories. I also have no nightmare stories, but I have 2 funny ones. So at work one time, somebody kept addressing me young lady. So I said, it's actually Christina. I go by Christina. So if you're being called young lady, which, okay, it's factual, I won't argue, but you don't want that penetrating and getting that as a nickname or sticking with you. So if it's somebody you're close to, you can kind of joke around and be like, oh, actually, it's professional lady, or, oh, I'm not that young anymore, whatever. But if it's somebody in an authority figure or somebody that you kind of can't be a sarcastic comment to, there are professional approaches of how to correct them politely. So that was my take on, it wasn't somebody super, super senior, but it wasn't somebody at my peer level, it wasn't a friend, and that's how I addressed getting them to stop addressing me as young lady. Was actually, I prefer Christina, and kind of reintroduced myself in the process. The other one I had, and it's similar to Allison's, with people kind of questioning, do you really know what you're talking about? Are you sure? And then trying to ask you questions to judge whether or not you're really good at it. This happened in the Northeastern bookstore when I was an undergrad. I was buying books. I think it was for physics. I can't remember the class, but I'm pretty sure it was for physics. And I was in the bookstore, and I was in the physics section, and I had my list, and I grabbed the book from the shelf, and a bookstore employee, male, came over and asked if I was finding everything and okay, and I said, yes, just grabbed it, but thank you. Had he been 2 minutes earlier, I probably would have needed help, but I had just found it. And he said to me, oh, like, what are you looking for? And I was like, oh, physics, I got it. And he's like, oh, well, that's the physics book for engineering. Oh, okay. And I said, oh, good, I have the right one then. So those things are gonna happen. You alluded to it a little bit already. They're not awful big Google, Uber, and I mean that both ways, Uber issues in my experience, but it is sometimes the really little things like word choice and questioning. And the best advice I can give is to not try to be one of the boys, not try to fit in with them or play their games or whatever it is. It's to earn your respect your own way, to be present in the moment. So if you're in a meeting and there's a lot of people in that meeting, put your phone away. Be really, really present in that meeting. Command respect, but also show respect back. Don't use cushiony language. So instead of, I think maybe if we maybe sort of try this, because you're immediately going to cut your credibility. If you just confidently say, I have an approach I think we should try, you're already putting forth an air of more confidence than undercutting by your own language. And I want to take credit for this really insightful thought, but I can't because it's from the book Feminist Fight Club. I don't know the author off the top of my head, but I read it earlier this year, and the book really focuses on the smaller things that happen and also the smaller, polite ways that we can correct our own behavior, because sometimes we're doing self-sabotage, and also how we can work to include males in that better behavior. That book does have some of those nightmare stories in it, but you're only going to learn from those and maybe be able to predict them ahead of time. But I think some of the big issues that we see a lot in the news are more sensationalized, and they're not important, but it's not going to be your day-to-day. The day-to-day is going to be a lot of the smaller things.
Thank you.
Yes, in my field, being medical field, there is a good balance between male and female. So I don't have any stories to say, but certainly, as both of you mentioned, I have been in meetings that I've been questioned more on my decision than other colleagues in the room.
I'm thrilled to hear that these ladies don't have the personal stories that I might have to tell, I'm not sharing. We're keeping this on a positive note. We have one last question of our panel before we move into the Q&A this evening. And I think it's important that they've been imparting advice as we go along the way. But for our audience here and our live audience on feed, one more word of wisdom that you might share that about your personal experiences, or maybe it's advice that you received from others. And I'll ask those in the audience to keep this in mind too, because maybe you have some words of wisdom that you'd like to share instead of a question to our panelists. So, words of wisdom. We're starting with Christina.
Yeah. So this is a loaded question for me because I have so many, but I am going to provide the most counterintuitive one that I possibly could select out of all the ideas I have. And that's, be careful what advice you take. So that's actually from a song. It's from the Sunscreen song. So if you haven't listened to it, you really, really should go back to your dorm room and listen to it tonight. And if you have listened to it, listen to it again. It's worth a refresh at any point in your life. It's still relevant, even though it was years and years and years ago. And the line says, be careful whose advice you buy, but be patient with those who supply it. And we're up here today giving you advice. You're going to hear it from your family, your friends, your peers, your teachers. There's going to be advice that just doesn't resonate with you and it just doesn't work for you. Don't try to force it to happen. Listen to it, appreciate it, take what you can from it, but don't try to square peg, round hole, because it's just not going to work. And I learned this firsthand from a book that I was given by a mentor called Never Eat Alone. It's on just about every best of business list that you've ever heard of or will ever Google. And I hated it. I did not like it at all. And I'm sorry if the author's watching, but I mean, he was this bigwig, important businessman with a very outgoing, friendly attitude. And his advice was basically to walk up to people at conferences and just say hello and start talking. And if you're shy and you're an introvert, none of that for me was resonating. I would be so uncomfortable the whole conference if I knew that was how I had to talk to people and how I was going to network. And I kind of dismissed the book because I said, this isn't relevant for me. But I have since then found a number of books that are relevant and topics and advice that are relevant to me and how I operate. So don't just take it for what it is. If just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And this came up again a month ago. I was at a running lecture and there was a panel of people, and one of the panelists was an elite runner from Jamaica. He's won numerous long-distance races. And for him, carbs the night before the race just did not work. He wanted sushi. If you read anything online about preparing for a race, it's don't eat sushi, but eat pasta. And here he is winning all these races, but he can't run the next morning on that full stomach of pasta and carbs and protein. He wants a really light meal. So if there's anybody that you would think would know the top-notch nutrition, it'd be this elite runner. And he knows it, but it doesn't work for him. So don't make it have to work for you if it doesn't.
Good advice. Thank you. Azita.
Look at your weaknesses as something that you could work on. Sometimes if you not do well in the class, as I gave the example earlier, or something that you need to work on, don't look at it as a weakness, but look at it as an opportunity for yourself to make you better. Look at yourself as a whole. Somebody told me when I first became a manager, "Are you a mother?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Then you are a manager." So use all your experience as a person, and personal life for work and work for personal life. The third and last one is try to understand the work you do. Try to understand your role, how it plays in the big picture. Any work that you take, if you know what you do, how it's used within that organization. It gives you a bird's-eye view of how other people precede you or your function in that organization. And certainly it would help you to do your job better.
Thank you. Allison?
I'm sort of just going to say a statement, and I'll elaborate on it afterwards, but it's one thing, and it's that nobody knows what they're doing. It's going to be okay if at one point in your career, or actually throughout your career, you feel like, wow, I don't know what I'm doing, or you feel underqualified, or you feel like you aren't the smartest person in the room, which I'm going to say, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You don't. You want to always, first of all, no one is the smartest person in the room because you always have something to learn from other people. This is what I've learned from my mentors at my current company. You always want to, everyone has something to learn from someone else. So no one's the smartest person in the room. And you also don't want to be, because you always want to be learning and pushing yourselves to a new limit. But what I mean by nobody knows what they're doing is that there's so much to learn, and there's going to be so much to continue to learn in your career. And it's important to have mentors and people you look up to. And even right today, I have mentors and people I look up to, and I'll continue to look up to them. And I've heard them say, like, God, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like humbling, because it's like, wow, you don't even know what you're doing. I thought you knew everything. But they don't. And I think that's what a lot of people talk about with imposter syndrome. You're going to feel like an imposter, but I promise you, you're not. We're all sort of learning. We're all going to continue learning. Approach things with humility. Continue to approach things with humility no matter where you are in your career, and always stay curious.
Wow. Thank you so much. I have to say, this is a fantastic amount of advice from such young and authoritative young women, and I'm really proud to be in your presence. I tell you, you have had a lot of really great things to say on every one of our questions. Would the audience like to ask and get sage advice from our panelists, or any kinds of insights? We have 2 microphones ready to run the room. We got one question. Is there a second one in the waiting? Because we'll have the mic at the second question.
Thank you so much for all the great advice that you gave. I have one question. Did you ever, I mean, you already mentioned it, but did you ever have a mentor who helped you throughout your career, and you feel like that was a big key in your success? And how do you find mentor? Like, in my current company, actually, I don't really have anyone as my mentor, and it was my first job. But I hear a lot that in some companies, like, they assign a mentor in the beginning to you, but I just don't know, like, how that process works. And I was wondering if you can give me some advice on that. Thanks.
What field are you in?
Computer science.
Okay.
And actually, one more question that I'm curious, like, especially in computer science, the company that I'm working, the group that I'm in it is, I'm the only woman. So not seeing like someone senior in computer science makes me feel like there are not much role models like who I can relate to. So that's also one thing that I'm curious about. Thanks.
Yeah, it's hard if you're not given a mentor. I wasn't given a mentor either for quite a while in my career. And I don't think I was actually ever given a mentor. I know there are companies that do set you up with a mentor, and I think that's awesome, such a great program. But I did have to sort of seek it and ask people, hey, could you take a look at my pull requests, the changes that I've made into this project, and ask them to comment on it. And usually people are very enthusiastic. Sometimes they do it without you asking. And usually when it's like written comments, you always have to assume positive intent, because you're going to, as a new person, you're going to get a lot of these comments on your code. And there's online, you can't read intent, right? It's very hard to see, are they real, like, wow, am I dumb? They left all of these comments. But that's usually not the case. They're just trying to like help you be better at what you're doing. I wish I had the best advice for you in your situation. I hope that there's someone at your company that maybe you can reach out to and ask them. And people, one thing I found is that people like to be asked to mentor for things because, well, they feel good about themselves. Like they feel smart when they get to answer it, right? And people just like to be able to help you out. And it's altruistic, of course, but everything's a little bit selfish probably. And I've learned a lot through mentoring. So I've gained a lot, and I want to continue mentoring, not just for the people that I'm mentoring, but also for myself to learn. So you're doing them a service too if you reach out to them and ask for mentoring. And if it's not at your company, if it's very small and it's hard to find, then there's a lot of great tech groups that meet in Boston. Of course, you'd have to put your own time into that if you have it. But some of them maybe it's just like an online chat room or something, that a supportive group. I hope that works. I don't know.
Yeah. So I haven't been at a company that had a formal program, but what I have done is made it known to my manager that I'm looking for a mentor, because they might know someone, or they might know someone that would be a good fit. So even if there isn't a program or you're having a little bit of difficulty making the connection on your own, speak up and let your manager or somebody that you feel close to know. And when you said that there weren't a lot of women, you have mentors of every background, of every demographic that you can, because it's only going to enrich the experience of getting a mentor. Now, don't go, I got this advice once of don't go so full throttle that you're spending all day, every day getting coffee with mentors and not doing any work. You don't want to do that either. But don't be afraid to reach out. Also, so I got a mentor when I was at Raytheon. I was in a meeting, and I was just there observing the meeting. But there was a woman in the meeting that she ran the best meeting I'd ever seen. She was professional, and she was on agenda, and people respected her. And she was so articulate and well-spoken. And I sent her a note. I sent her an email after, and I said, my name is Christina. I was in this status meeting yesterday. I didn't speak, but I was in the room, and I was so impressed with how you conducted that meeting. I'm trying to improve on my skill set of leading an effective meeting. Would you mind if we met up for a coffee and I could learn how you've taught yourself to do that? So you might have to reach out sometimes and find them on your own. And we make mentoring sometimes this really big, scary verb, and it doesn't always have to be months long. It could just be that one coffee meeting that you got 1 hour session with this lady that gave you a lot of great advice on how to run an effective meeting and how she learned how to do that. So it doesn't always have to be recurring mentoring. It can be one-offs just to learn one thing here or there.
On one point that you said earlier, you have to fit with the personality of your mentor. You cannot, if somebody doing a good job and you cannot be to connect with them of how they are doing their job, they cannot be a good mentor for you. So you have to look to see exactly what you mentioned, what is about that person that you could learn about. Workplaces, having somebody to be there to see your interaction and you see their interaction, it's a better opportunity to have a mentor rather than online or somebody outside. But if there is nobody you could find in your workplace to take that mentorship role for you, then asking for somebody outside, it's not a bad idea.
Thank you. Next question.
So thank you again for coming tonight. I think we've all learned a little bit. I know I certainly have. My question is, how do you stay motivated when you're working on a project that you hate? How do you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel? And if you don't have a project-related question, maybe talk about a job that you didn't like and how you kind of found your next opportunity, but what you did to keep yourself motivated, getting up and coming into work every day.
What's the saying? There's not every day is good, but there's a little bit of good in every day. It's going to be the same with job and with projects. They're not always going to be good. They're not always going to be smooth, but there's some good somewhere in that project. So you might not like the assignment or like the overall project that you're in, but is there something that you can pull from it? So let's say, we'll use my meeting example from the last one. So let's say that you're in this project and you really don't like it, but you're in charge of leading all the meetings. Work on your meeting running skill. Find a skill or find something that you can work on, even if it's a project that you don't like or an assignment that you don't like. so you have something to look forward to in it. And then if you really can't find anything, sometimes things are just not going smoothly in life, right? It happens. What can you learn about what's not going well that will help you? Right. I'm not liking this project because of X. And I had a co-op in research and development, and I didn't like it at all. It was just test and try again, test and try again, test and try again. And I like to see a little bit of a win. I like to see some type of end result. So research and development it wasn't for me, and I didn't like that co-op, but at the same time, it also was motivating because I learned something I didn't want out of my job and I didn't want out of my career. So if you're really stuck in something that's not going well or that you're not enjoying, there's something to be learned from it, whether it's building a skill that you don't have, working with a group of people that you really like. I've had a lot of projects lately that I haven't really loved the project, but man, did I get to work with some great people, and I got to focus on that connection. So just find that good in whatever it is, and if it's completely non-existent, what can you learn from the bad that you don't fall into that trap again?
Other questions? Other advice? Oh, come on, you guys. Yeah.
So I heard that Ms. Cash had said earlier not to pad your language when you're speaking. Like, I think maybe we should like that. What's your stance on emails when you're emailing? Like, would you phrase your emails the way you would speak assertively, or would you pad that?
I don't. One thing I am super guilty of and I've been working on is I started so many emails with just wanted to follow up on. Cut out the word just, you don't need it. The word just and the word actually. Cut that out of every email. You don't need either of those words, they're fillers. If you're writing them in email, you're not just writing them in email, you are writing them in email to follow up. You're not actually checking to see if they finished the file, you're just checking to see if they finished the file. So there's some filler words that you just don't need. And I write very quick emails because I don't love email as a way to relay a lot of information. I'd rather you call me or I call you. So I do quicker emails, more to the point. I cut out the filler words, but I don't make them curt. I don't make them rude. So there's a balance between being so direct that you're rude and being so cushiony that you have a lot of superfluous words kind of going in there and messing up the messaging. So it's a little bit of an art. It won't be your first email is knocked out of the park, but it takes practice, and the best advice I can say is reread it a couple times and pull out those filler words, make sure it's not too directive, that it's nice, and you end it nicely. I think every email should end with a take care, a sincerely, a thank you, because that's instantly a little bit of politeness that you can say, no matter what the email context said, you're ending with a degree of politeness at the end.
I think one thing that's really important also with that is that those ways of saying things and not padding it is very important, but we're not trying to tell you that you need to speak like a man, right? You don't need to, these softer words that are maybe more feminine or whatever. That's okay, that should be okay. That's where we're trying to get to. And of course, like, we all have different speech patterns, and these things should be okay. Padding your emails or whatever it may be. That's going to be something that is going to be effective for sure, especially if you're trying to be assertive about what you know and have people like really take you serious about it. But it doesn't mean like in general you have to do everything differently. You can't be feminine, or it has to be more masculine. It should be somewhere. We all have something to learn from different speech patterns and everything like that, I think.
And I want to add on to that because I think you make up a great point about not having to act like a man or speak like a man. There is advice in a book that says, don't bring in baked goods. Okay, I have a friend that is a wonderful baker. She can make things from scratch that would make Bobby Flay blush. And she would bring them into work. And you know what? Nobody thought any less of her because she brought baked goods into work. She did a stellar job when she was in that section of the company. She's moved on to some great big and better things because she's a stellar employee. Bringing those baked goods in helped her be her true authentic self. People learned about her. People say, oh, if I have a question on cookies, I know who to go ask. If I need a recipe for an upcoming party or I need to impress someone, I know who to go ask. So she brought her full self to work by doing that, and people only appreciated who she was more because they saw the person behind just this person in this job, this engineer in this job, because there was somebody else with a hobby there. So she didn't have to hide her femininity and liking to bake to still be good at her job. So I think that's a really important point.
So there's a question here and a mic coming to you. Thanks.
The cookies just reminded me of something that I wanted to ask Azita. I think things have really changed since I was your age in engineering. If you brought in cookies 10, 15 years ago, you'd lose credibility. And I wanted to ask Azita, how have you seen the position of women in engineering in your field change throughout the years?
In the healthcare, so we have worked with male and female, but certainly bring in my field, if you brought cookies, it add that personal part of it, and we knew who is good for what. If we had a long meeting, we will ask this person. It would be, we could sit in this meeting for longer if you bring the cookies, or we learn how, if you do this job for me, I could, to some extent, bribery, but it brought that personal touch to it. And I didn't have that experience in my field.
One more time.
Sure.
How do you see the position of women change throughout the years? You know, I mean,
Yes.
we had challenges
Sure.
20 years ago that the young women in engineering don't have, and you've seen it more than you guys have seen it. And also, how do you see the international setting? You know, women in engineering in Europe, in Asia, in Australia. How do you see their position differently than, being different than the women in the United States?
What I have seen in my career, that in lower job fields, not in executive roles, we didn't have much women. More and more I see in executive function, we have a head of global finance. Those were the fields usually were dominated by male. More so, I will see women presenting in those roles.
Internationally?
Internationally.
And how do you see, I'm sorry,
Yes.
do you see, you deal with women from other countries, how do you see them different, the way their position is?
I think it's very different throughout different countries. I wish I could say more to how it is in other countries. I know that whether it's Europe or Asia or America, there's a lot of different challenges that the women there face that we may not. There may be different levels of feminism in each of these countries. I'm not an expert, though. I can only truly speak for the United States, and I wish I knew more women in other countries and could see their experience.
We have a question here.
So it's sort of a question and a statement. First, I want to commend you all. This has been an outstanding panel presentation. The answers have been amazing, motivating, and just encouraging overall. So thank you for all of your feedback. I guess a theme that I'm noticing and something that I've sort of experienced, and I think it sort of runs as a common thread throughout the panel, is this expression of being your whole self, right? You don't want to hold yourself back, but you don't want to be too forward. And I definitely get the message of be assertive and command your space in the room, and don't be put down, and don't feel challenged by everybody, especially when they are challenging you to determine how much information do you know. And it's exhausting, right? And intimidating sometimes, especially if you're in a room of, older folks that you feel like might have, more wisdom and information to back them, or if you're in a room of males where you feel like you need to have a standout attitude and so forth. And something I've recently come around to, and it's very similar to you know nothing or nobody knows anything, kind of that idea of, and I express it to a lot of the students that I have when I'm mentoring, and I say, my catchphrase, and I think I already said it to someone here tonight, is I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if I'm too comfortable, then I'm not learning. And if I'm uncomfortable, then there's probably something for me to work on, and so forth. But some of the discomfort comes from I shy away from wanting to be who I am. And I want to oversell myself, but I also want to undersell so that someone will teach me. Because if you're too forward, they don't, there's not that compromise. And so I guess my question is, and this is sort of that space where I think, again, you've all been through it, is on an interview. How do you present yourself? What is your best interview advice for not coming across too strong, but not pulling back so much that they don't see the value of who you might be?
Great question.
Be confident. Yes. Be confident in your experience, and be yourself. Listen what they are asking, what the questions are. Try not to read ahead, but be at the present moment. And if you don't get a job, that doesn't mean that you are not qualified. There is a work atmosphere that you have to meet, the criteria you have to meet to be able to work in that place. It could be they would love you, but you could say, I don't like this. The philosophy, it doesn't work with me. The personality doesn't. Not only it's the skill, but the personality fit.
And confidence is a great one. I probably wouldn't have come up with that, so that was really good you did. Prepare. I know that seems super obvious that why would you not prepare for a job interview? But not just preparing what you're going to say, saying it out loud too, because then you can get some dimensions of your tone of voice and making sure that you are balancing that confidence with that humility of not coming across like you know everything and you're going to come in and take over and just be the best thing that they've ever hired. So practice it out loud, and that's what I got is practice. Because I've been there. I can feel the difference if I practice for something versus when I don't practice for something.
When it comes to feeling like you need to hold back or anything, in an interview, I want to say, don't hold back. Show them everything that you know. And I think as women in tech, one of the best feelings is when someone is putting you down and you just knock it out of the park. That feels so good. But humility is very important too, and there may come a point in the interview, especially if you are knocking it out of the point, the questions sometimes get harder and harder. To the point where they don't expect you to even be able to answer it, but they expect you to ask the right questions. To say, I don't know the answer. Could you ask for well, how would you approach it? That's a great question to always ask in interviews. How did I do? If I didn't do it the right way, how would you have approached it? What is a better way to do it? Of course, that's your opportunity to show them as much as you have and go as far as you can. And when you can't anymore, ask questions, and also treat interviews as your opportunity to interview that company. Because like they've mentioned, is culture fit. Do you think that you would fit in that company as well? That's a great opportunity to find that out.
And don't shy away sometimes from hobbies if it came up and it's the appropriate context. So I never would ever talk about stuff like that in an interview. And I had a manager of a manager one time say, I like to hear a little bit about their hobbies, because maybe if they tell me that they're on a competitive intramural team, I know they've got some competitive edge, they've got some extra energy, they're taking care of themselves and they're healthy. So sometimes if the context is right, a hobby can help shed a little bit of light into who you are and other skill sets that might not come through in just the very work-related questions. So just keep that in mind, but again, if the context is right, because we were interviewing somebody that they were on some competitive intramural league, or they had been in college. We were hiring them as a new hire, and I didn't really pay it a lot of mind, but my manager's manager said, no, this is good. That means that they've got some extra drive. They've got extra energy. They're taking care of themselves. So they saw something in that nugget that wasn't really academic related that reflected well on that person.
Another question? Sure. There's another mic down here at the front too, but we'll take this one first. Thanks.
Hi, I wanted to ask how different does it feel to work in an actual company whereas you worked in a co-op? Like, is it really a different experience or is it the same?
So co-op, you're trying to cram a lot in 6 months because you know you have an expiration date-ish, kind of. I think, but not, you don't want it to be an expiration date. You want that co-op to turn into a full-time job. So you want to do well in your 6 months. So there can sometimes be almost more pressure to prove yourself when you're in something for 6 months versus a little bit longer term. And one thing that can be tough going in as a co-op is some people are really happy to have you, and yes, you're going to be so eager and you're going to do so much for us, and then some people are like, well, you're only here for 6 months. By the time I train you, you're going to be out the door. So having that attitude of going in and being like, how can I help you? Because I know I'm only here for 6 months and I want to do a good job in the 6 months that I'm here, is a good way to think about doing the best job that you can in a co-op. But I would say otherwise, treat it like you're a real employee. Dress professionally, speak professionally. If it's not something that turns into a full-time job, it is still going to be a good experience. So only really see it as different because you're only there for a shorter amount of time and you want to cram more great stuff in.
I've had pretty good experiences with all of my co-ops. I felt like a real employee, and I was doing the work that their full-time employees were doing. So for me, all I have to add is that it was very similar, and I'm very grateful for that.
I started a co-op program and I continued working for them as a part-time after co-op and a full-time to some extent during my graduate school. So the differences for me being when you're a co-op program, you have less responsibility. People are not so much depending on you, even though you have assignment to it, but long-term, there is not much responsibility given. But when you work part-time or full-time, you have ownership of some task, and your responsibility level increases.
Another question here in the front.
Yes. I am coming from the education field, so I'm a teacher. Previous interest in science, but then got a master's here in education. And so my question is, lately I've been seeing a lot of female students. I'm a kindergarten teacher, but I've been seeing a lot of female students interested in engineering activities in the classroom or building, hanging out with, the boys and building with the boys. And what kind of support did you guys get from your teachers that helped you feel comfortable being in these fields and feeling like you could make it this far?
That's an excellent question.
I have a pretty funny experience, and this was back in middle school, and it's actually sort of the opposite of an experience that I feel like a lot of women get, and that was, I say women, I was a kid, I was middle school, and I loved English, and I loved writing, and I was certain I wanted to be a writer. And then it was like 4th grade, we did awards or something, and I won the award for math. And I had no idea that I was good at math. I had never really thought that this was something that you could continue to go on to, but my teachers were right. That was my best grade. I was best in the class in math, and I got recognized for that. And I feel like a lot of girls don't get recognized for that. Even if they are the best in the class, even if they are an A, someone else will get it over them, and that stinks, and that discourages them. And it's sad. I was discouraged from continuing with English and writing, and I started thinking, wow, I'm good at math. I'm going to own it. Like, as a kid, you get so excited about that, and it's so important when you're a kid. Like, they really, just cling on to that motivation, and it did stick with me. It stuck with me through high school, and then it gave me the confidence to make me go to computer science. So it's sort of that, affirmation, you're good at this, and I recognize that. Do what you love to do, especially if you're great at it. That's sort of my experience, even though it was very early on.
Mine was similarly that early on. In middle school, I had a number of teachers that recognized I was good in math and science. They talked to me about it. They talked to my parents about it. We had a number of students that were very advanced in math in my class, and they started a whole new math class for the advanced level. So recognizing that talent in the students and championing it so it doesn't go unnoticed. And I think it's very important that it's coming from two people, that it was middle school, because science and studies show it's middle school / junior high where the interest drops. So when you can be that young and have them that young to nourish that thought, that's going to stick with them because they're actually going to start around age 6 dropping off by their own means because of other factors and other external influences. So getting to them young and nurturing that young is critical.
Other questions? Did you have anything?
I'm not in engineering. Okay. I cannot comment on that. Thank you.
Well, it was a science question of what might mentor. I can think of, for me, I think it was my high school teacher who sent me off to a women in engineering program and just made me aware of the opportunities that existed back then in the late 1970s. So I'm much older than you all. Another question, yeah.
Hi, it's good to see all of you and listen to the panel. It's very, very impressive. My name is Aruna Sharma, and I graduated from Northeastern in 1997. Prior to that, I was actually an immigrant, international student from Nepal, Kathmandu. And I remember the question about the woman in STEM in other countries. I'm not an expert in sociology and all that, but my personal experience was I was very much encouraged to study science, but within the boundary, which was if you're a girl, you go to the medical, biology or chemistry, and if you're a boy, you go to engineering. So I didn't get to study engineering back home. But I always liked science and technology, so it didn't matter to me whether it's a chemistry or physics. So I studied chemistry and biology at home, and my parents' hope was I'll be a doctor, but I didn't want it to be a medical doctor. So instead, I came to America. I did some work in computer and hydropower project. So my interest was more in power. So that's why I ended up studying electrical engineering technology. And my experience has always been very, very encouraging. I never was discouraged. I was given more opportunity when co-oping was wonderful. I had 5 different job offers after I graduated. I could, it was a good time. I could ask more jobs, choices, and everything. But as being a woman, and I think a little bit of influence of traditional values, I decided to stay home and took care of my child and totally dedicated to family values. I did a lot of voluntary work, social work, and everything. And now I'm trying to get back to work. It's total disaster. So my question to you is, how is the trend of the company now? Seeing all you, fabulous women who has the similar, challenges as a woman, have anything to do with somebody who wants to come back to returning professionals? Is there a space? Is there age discrimination? I know we hear a lot about gender discrimination. I have not really have a direct understanding of if there is age discrimination in America or anything, but I definitely am feeling a little bit of, differences of how employer approach to a, recent graduate versus somebody who want to get back as a woman. If you could, have any insight.
I think there is a little bit of ageism. I do, and both for young coming out of college, entitled, they don't know anything, and more senior of, well, what if we hire them and train them and then they only stay for 2 years because they're nearing retirement? So I think there is unfortunately a little ageism. At least I see it, and I see it at every stage in your career for different reasons. So I think there is a little bit. I think that good news though is there's a lot more women in the workplace to help support bringing more women in. But I don't have any concrete advice on the matter. But if you're imagining a little bit of ageism, I think it kind of does, unfortunately, exist in different levels throughout the age after college when you get in the workforce.
Is that just for the woman or also for men?
Some of them, the two examples I gave of being kind of fresh out of college and at the other end of the spectrum, I've seen it go both ways for men and women. So I see that a little bit for both.
I think there are a lot of workplace flexibility perks that are coming up that's much more comfortable for women or people who have a family. And then for at least what I see in the tech space, I see a lot of these programs that aim to educate people. There's a lot of them focusing on educating women, on new technology, things that you might have missed. If you're busy being a mother, technology moves so fast, right? You didn't have an opportunity to work on these projects and work on the modern tech things. So these programs, I think like Girl Develop It, and I think Girl Develop It actually does focus on women who are looking to get back into the tech space. But there's a lot of them. I see a lot of them coming up, especially in the cities, where you can sort of just like try to get up to date on like what are the new things that all of these companies are doing and how can I try to like work my way back in there. And with the new flexibility perks, flexible hours, remote work, it hopefully is becoming better than ever to get back into the workplace. We're absolutely not perfect yet, but I hope we get there.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to thank our panelists for their wonderful responses, insightful, heartfelt responses. And so right now, for closing remarks, I want to introduce Dean Susan Parrish. And this is an easier school to pronounce from the Bouvet Health Sciences College. And she's going to be making her closing remarks. Dean Parrish has extensive experience within public health, bringing her expertise on community health care delivery systems to the Northeastern community. Her initiatives and work ensure that the Bouvet students and faculty have access to practice sites that prepare graduates to meet healthcare needs of our urban neighbors and society. So Dean Parrish, please come.
Thank you. I just want to start off by expressing my gratitude to all three panelists. And I appreciated the insights that I learned from each of the three of you, just, despite the age differences and me being closer in age to you. And I think that your willingness to share your experiences and your expertise with all of us are really what makes workplaces stronger nowadays. I have benefited so much from women colleagues who've been willing to share generously, and just like you've done with us tonight. And so I thank you for that. I just want to give a little bit of an anecdote about why I think it is so crucially important for us all to work to encourage women to go into the sciences. I earned my PhD in 2001, and at that point, the NIH had issued its Women's Health Initiative only 10 years before, in 1991. And this was the first time that the National Institutes of Health, essentially, an arm of our federal government, actually decided that they needed to do research on women's health. 1991. Up until that time, it was perfectly acceptable to get federal funding, do a health research study, and not have a single woman in your trial. And the absurdity of that kind of compelled me to go into the work I do as a researcher, where I'm really interested in women's reproductive health, reproductive rights, maternal and child health. And I think that being part of a community of women scientists is sending the most powerful message we can, that our voices matter, and we absolutely must be counted. And I came into this sort of angry young feminist, not really that young, but I'm not going to let you do the math. And now I'm the mom of a 17-year-old who really thinks that any form of science she wants to go into is wide open for her. And I hope that as she goes through whatever path she's on, that she's going to be supported by wonderful women like you, who are clearly blazing a trail for all of us. So thank you very much for sharing with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great conversation, and I promise I will be quick. Thank you to everyone who is here tonight, both in person and online. This program is one that, personally for me, I have a lot of interest in this topic, being the mom to a little girl with another one on the way. I am hopeful that when they are at the point, similar to what Dean Parrish said, when they're at the point that they're determining and deciding what it is that they want to do, that they do not see any roadblocks, that they are able to go into whatever field, and I personally will direct them more in this direction myself. My name is Lori Jakes. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Alumni Relations, and I want to thank our three alumni speakers, Azita, Christina, and Allison, as well as Dean Broadley, Dean Parrish, and our Associate Dean Isaacs here for this wonderful job that they did tonight. So let's give them a round of applause again. In my job, we focus on making sure that our alumni are connected to not only the university, but to each other. So I think the one piece of advice that I would like to leave you with in closing is, if you do not have the opportunity to meet someone new this evening, make sure you take the time before you leave to do that. I think it's truly important as we as female and the males that are here as well, that we focus on expanding our network and connecting with each other. There are many questions on mentoring and whatnot, and I think having that network will help you to find the mentors that you need to do what it is that you want to accomplish. So certainly before you leave, connect with each other after tonight. Join us for another alumni program. We offer many throughout the year. So I hope to see you again soon. And lastly, I just want to invite you all to join us in November for another Women Who Empower program that will feature the former global CEO of Chanel and the author of Beyond the Label, Maureen Chiquet. She will be coming here to campus. More details can be found in the last page of the program or on the alumni website, but this is certainly another program that is worthwhile, and I hope you will take the opportunity to join us. So again, thank you for being here this evening, and have a great night.